and some basic points about the constructor we learned. Now we need to understand what is the use of private protected constructor. Yesterday I told you, but how to implement for that we need to finish concept of inheritance, abstraction and all. Then it is good to understand those private constructors, right? But point I explained for singleton mechanism, how to implement singleton mechanism, for that we need to learn some more basics. After learning those basics, I will show you how we can implement them and use them. So we discussed about the basic of a constructor. Means just we learned what is constructor and the purpose of constructor in class. So these are the two things we have learned, right? So important is, now when we are dealing with constructors, I already told you that they can have different access specifiers. Now immediately one more doubt comes is, so class database, we have a constructor. Class database and we have a constructor. So we have a constructor. So many times one more doubt comes is, can I have multiple constructors? That means I am defining another constructor and I am defining some parameters into it, a comma b comma, like that. So technically it is not possible to have multiple constructors. So every class can have only constructor. Multiple constructor implementation are not allowed. That is general basic thing. So this can we use multiple constructors. So it's not possible. Multiple constructor implementations are not allowed. So that is the general question comes regularly. And can we define access modifiers for constructor? So that is yes, we can define for constructor. So these are the general points we need to understand, right? Now constructor private, constructor protected, constructor static, all these things I will tell you after understanding few more points. Here constructor plays the key role in so many aspects. We will discuss about that detailedly. We will see that. Now generally many people ask one question like, can interface have a constructor? What do you say? Can interface have a constructor? So interface cannot have a constructor. So answer is no. So why interface cannot have a constructor? Why interface cannot have a constructor? So why interface cannot have a constructor? Many times majority of your answers are good, but one basic point you forgot is, you are still not into my track. You are in your track only. That means you are still thinking about general concepts. You are still not into my track, many of you them. Because according to our concept, you are all people saying that we cannot create an object. That is, you cannot create an object if you don't have a constructor. Our question is, why interface cannot have constructor? Because the point is, interface is a contract. It cannot contain any implementation of functionality. Am I right? Am I right? That means constructor needs some functionality to be defined, right? Does construction doesn't have only declaration, it contains definition also. You are, and there cannot be definition. That means what should be the answer then? What should be the answer then? You should say that. You should say that the answer, some people are correct in answering that. So 1-2 people have answered correctly. So you should say that constructor requires definition, or you can say implementation of functionality, and interface will not allow. Am I right? Constructor requires implementation of functionality. You can say that implementation of the functionality, but it is not allowed. It is not allowed. So that is the basic thing you should know about it. So that is one point. Another point is, later I will tell you about inheritance and all. Already we learned inheritance. So in the concept of interfaces. So here, while learning about the classes also, I will show you the point we will see, but inheritance we will discuss later. Actually, related to constructors, one more important question is, why multiple inheritance is not supported for classes? Why multiple inheritance is not supported for classes? That is important. So why multiple inheritance is not supported for classes? That is the question. Generally, we discussed one point already. I told you, if you remembered, right? We discussed about a point, deadlock situation. Remember, right? We discussed about constructor deadlocks will happen because all classes, that is also related to constructor deadlock. This is the first thing which will not allow any other also. In inheritance, I will show you that, right? These are all related to constructors. Now, can a constructor have parameters? So answer is yes, a constructor can have parameters. Now, can it have multiple parameters? Of course, it can have multiple parameters also. It can have multiple parameters. Because these are general doubts from the learners, so we should know about them, right? So this is basic about constructor. Later, we will discuss some more things about constructor after understanding other concepts. So up to this, these points are enough to understand about constructor. So in the class, we are discussing about class members in that constructor. Next, after understanding about constructor, now we need to know about properties. Properties. So the typical members of a class are first constructor and properties. Next, properties. So the point is, what are properties? I told you when we discussed about object. Actually, properties are used to store data. Stored data. Properties are used to store data. So properties. So then generally data is stored in properties. Then one regular question asked, so many questions will be there on this point here. So first one is, what is difference between between variable and property? What is difference between variable and property? This is a very general question in interviews. Remember, you can expect 60-70% of interview on Angular will happen on TypeScript only. So if you are not perfect in TypeScript, that means you think that you are good with very big language like Java or .NET, and you take it TypeScript light, and you answer in the same way how you know in Java and .NET, you will fail every interview of Angular especially. And because 60-70% of Angular questions in interviews will be TypeScript only. Because if interviewer asks questions on Angular, it is easy for anybody to handle those questions. Because in Angular, all the questions are context based. Context based means exactly majority we know what they will ask. They can ask. That means they cannot go outside that scope. They will have to ask within that scope. But when it comes to language, there is no boundary for asking the question. So much they can go to test the skill levels. That's the reason you should get prepared with a lot of TypeScript concept when you are planning to attend interviews on Angular especially. And these questions are very common. So what is difference between a variable and a property? That means here the point is, so let, so name, so some name is equal to, so it is a string type. It is a string type. And here we are defining some name. And a public name, it is a string type, is equal to some name. What is difference between these two? That is the general thing. What is difference between a variable and a property? The first one is variable, second one is property. So this is variable. This is property. So what is difference between variables and properties? This is the important one. Yeah. Actually, the first thing you should know about variable. Variables are immutable. Variables are immutable. Technically, variables are immutable. So we have a mutable and immutable concept. In the data types I told you. So in the data types we discussed about them. Variables are immutable actually. Immutable means once the memory is allocated to store any value, that memory is fixed for that particular variable. It cannot be changed. Later, if I want to handle different types of values, or later I want to handle more than what it is allocated for it, then it will be difficult. It will be difficult. So variables, so immutable, that means their state cannot be changed, cannot be changed after created. Their state cannot be changed after created. So this is the first basic thing about variables. So their state cannot be changed after created. That is the key point about variables. And the property, and important is variables are less secured. That means lack of code security. They are less secured because lack of code security. They have scope-based access, but they lack the security. That means how I can make LET name as read only so that I cannot modify. How we can do that? In variable, how we can make this name read only so that once we defined, we cannot modify. How we can do that? We can use const, am I right? We can use const, right? So we can use const for that, right? But when you declare by using const, later, according to the situation, it should allow to render some value inside it. Then it cannot change its state from const to var. Am I right? Am I right? It cannot change its state from const to var. So they have restricted access. They are less secured. That means they have scope, but they are less secured. Scope means they can be used in a function, they can be used in a block, right? But who can access, who cannot access? Authorized access, such things cannot be defined for variables. But in terms of property, so this is about variables. In terms of properties, so properties. So properties are mutable. Dynamically creating it. This pic have src, so is equal to some src. And here, if anyone asks, here what is src? Here it is property, not attribute. So this point you will understand later. So generally, when you are dynamically dealing with it, then it is property, right? So statically, when you are configuring and using it, then it is attribute. In HTML, you will never use properties. In HTML tags, whatever you use, they are attributes. They are attributes only. When you are dynamically using them through your Angular, JavaScript, jQuery, then you use properties. You use properties. That's the reason one more comparison will come. What is difference between attribute and property? So what is an attribute and what is a property? This you will understand when we learn about data binding in Angular. We have property binding, attribute binding like concepts. We will discuss about that. Initially, we should know currently difference between variables and properties. And important is class will not allow variables. Class will not allow variables. Class can contain only properties. I hope you are clear. Because many times some people will ask question, right? Like, sir, in this class, can I use let x is equal to 10? It's not possible. Class will not allow variables. That means this let. So that means it is an unexpected token because it is expecting a constructor or a method or an accessor or a property, as I told you. That means what are the members in a class? A class can contain a constructor, it can contain a method, it can contain an accessor or a property. You cannot have anything else inside that. These are the general members, already I told you. So that means you cannot have a variable inside the class. Cannot have variable inside class. That means it can be a property. So it can be a property. So access specifiers, access modifiers, I told you already. What are the access modifiers to define? But first, you need to know that class will not allow variables. And class can contain only properties. So, and properties can be defined with accessors. Properties can be defined with accessors. Now the question here is, what is the purpose of accessors? What do you say? You learned already. What is the purpose of accessors? What is the purpose of accessors? What do you say? The purpose of access. So you can say authorized access to the property. They provide authorized access to the property. Am I right? They provide authorized access to the properties. Right. See, you need to keep these technical terms and remember these terms, because while answering in interviews, you have to hit these terms. Otherwise, they will think that you are just a learner. Many people say that, sir, I have 3 years gap. I want to put some fake experience and I want to attend interviews. What do you think? Interviewer is a fool that he don't know that you are faking your experience and you are genius. Then MNC companies, you are fooling, you think that you are fooling MNCs with your experience. That means, what do you think? That MNCs and the companies who are interviewing you, the interviewer, don't know about your faking experience? They know about it. Only the point is, if all the documents, background verification of your experience is justified and you have good skills, that they will find out in interview, because they know that. So if they will first ask a question, where you learned, I learned from an institute from Amirpet. Then immediately, fake person came, interviewer, because Amirpet means fake. Means Amirpet, I came from Amirpet, Hyderabad means the production of fake experience people. It is a big producing center, right? And if you say that I am from Hyderabad, then interviewer is ready to face a fake person. He knows that because Amirpet has got that reputation, right? That's the reason when you speak, you need to hit the technical words. So that means at least he will get an idea that, okay, he knows technically what it is. That is where you can crack the interviews well. If you remember those technical terms, hit those words. So that means accessors. That means you should immediately remember about authorized access. You try to explain your answer, he is not interested in that. He is expecting the technical term. Then he will keep on asking you, and no, tell me something more about it. That means you are not in the right track in explaining it. So you need to hit the technical words. So what is the purpose of accessor? The best answer will be provides authorized access. Provides authorized access. That is important. It provides authorized access to properties. This is the key point you need to know about this. So this is basic thing you need to understand. So properties contain the data, and properties can have accessors, can be defined with accessors. Those accessors example already I showed you. No need to explain them. So how do we differ it from the variables? What is difference between variables and properties? These are the points. Okay. Next, after understanding this, now already we know that properties can be defined with access modifiers like public, private, and protected. That also I showed you what is difference between those public, private, and protected. And property can be configured as read only. What is the purpose of read only property? What is the purpose of read only property? What do you say? Already I told you in interface, we discussed about that. What is the purpose of read only property? After implementation, it will not allow to change. Am I right? You cannot modify after implementation. Once it is initialized, it cannot be changed, right? So once it is initialized, it cannot be changed. After initializing, you cannot change it. That is what actually read only. So that means it will prevent extensibility of that particular property. Property can no longer extend it. If you don't want the property to be extended, then keep it read only. So, and it will not even allow you to set the value, right? This is the basic thing about the properties. So how do we configure the properties and how do we use the properties? Okay. Next, important in a class, how to write the properties already I told you. Generally, how do we write the properties we discussed? So we have a class demo and properties are defined. So public and name and its type is equal to some value. How we can define the properties configured. What is the default? And one more important point is property can be static or non-static. Property can be static or non-static. And important, static property is accessible within the class or outside class by using class name. Already we learned about this now. And non-static property, non-static property is accessible within the class, within the class, within the class by using this keyword, and outside the class by using outside the class, it is accessible by using instance of class, instance of class. These are the basic points already we discussed. So we need to be clear in this. So these are all the points about the properties. How do we define, configure, and use the properties? We will use in various examples. Accessors, get accessor, set accessor, already given example. These are all basic points we need to know. And when to create a static property? Can you tell me? When to create a static property? When to create a static property? Static property. So we need to create a static property when we want it to use allocate a continuous memory. Understood? Static means continuous memory, na? Right? That means if we want to access continuously across all objects, am I right? If you want to access the property across all objects continuously, then you need to configure it as static. For every object, it should be individual. Then we have to define as non-static. Right? Hope you are clear in this point. Understood that, right? So static properties and non-static properties. Okay. Next, important. So we need to understand, after understanding all these points about properties, next we need to know about methods in class. We need to understand about methods in class. Here, so much is there to understand and work with the methods. Technically, what are the methods? Actually, so method defines the actions to be performed. Method defines the actions to be performed. It defines what actions to be performed. That is important. That means method defines the actions to be performed. Generally, so the actions to be performed, that means we have properties, we have methods, and already we know that. So logic is defined in method. Logic is defined in method. Data is in properties, and the logic is defined in method. Technically, here one more question comes regularly. See, generally, suppose we have suppose a general example. So general example. Suppose we have a object. So we have an object here, right? So we have an object like, so we have a balloon. Suppose some balloon. So balloon. Okay, and this balloon is having 5.5 mm diameter, and this balloon is green in color. I'm taking a general example. So it is green in color, right? When we pin the balloon, so then it will explode. So when we kick, suppose just basically when you kick That means it will fly. Now here, how the object looks like, that means what is its size, color, these comes under properties. So that means what it looks like, how it looks like, these are properties. What actions it can do, it can explode and it can fly, these are called methods, means what it can do. When these methods are performed, when you pin and when you kick, these are called actually events. That means the actions are performed by an object when an event fires up. So when event fires up, it will do that functionality. So when pin, it will explode. When kick, it will fly. These are the actions performed by an object. So that means if I take this, a technical example now, that means suppose we have technical example like we have button. So button is a class. This button class have properties like text. It has properties like color. It has properties like width. Okay. And a button has methods like open. Method has like close. Method has like print. These are the methods. Now, generally, these are the properties which describe the button. And these are the methods that defines the functionality. These are the methods that define the functionality. That means you created a button. So some save button or some submit button. You created some button that is like some open button. When I click the open button, so it will open a window. That means click is event and open is the action. On click, it opens. So not only on click, suppose on mouse over, it can close. On mouse over, it can close. That means mouse over is an event. On that, it can close. That means what actions an object can perform, the behavior according to the state. For example, now if I ask you a question, so this button is derived from the button class. Can I use this button to close window? Can I use that button for close? Can we use that button for close? It is an open button. Can I use button for close? Yes, we can use the button for close. Why? Because it is derived from this class. If it is derived from class, it can use all these properties and methods. At different states, it can do different functionalities. That means you heard about toggle buttons. You know toggle button? Toggle button means once click to on, again click to off. That means it is doing two functionalities. Am I right? On and off. It is doing two functionalities. So that means method defines the actions to be performed by an object. What actions you can give to control its behavior. The behavior of an object can be controlled by using certain functions, certain methods. So the logic is defined in methods. And very important is the behavior is controlled. The behavior of objects is controlled by using methods. The behavior of object is controlled by using methods. Now, important question regularly comes is, what is difference between a function, method, and procedure? Function, method, and procedure. This is a regular question. What is difference between a function, method, and procedure? What is difference between a function, method, and procedure? These are the important things. Actually, the answer for this is technically function always intended to return a value, and method not intended to return a value. So that means it is not designed for returning a value. Functions are always designed for returning a value. Functions return value. Methods will not return value. But in JavaScript, method can do both. It can return value, it may not return value. Actually, procedure may or may not return value. So it depends on its state. Suppose you have learnt databases like Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL. You have a stored procedure. Am I right? Stored procedure. Right? You have a stored procedure. Right? You have stored procedure. Now, stored procedure contains some logic. Am I right? Stored procedure contains some logic. Right? Then why it is called procedure? Why not method? Why it is called procedure? Why not method? Why especially in database you have this procedure word? Actually, in early days of programming, so many languages have procedure technique. But now majority function and method based. But why it is called procedure? Why it is called procedure? If you learnt Oracle or any other database, tell me why it is called procedure. Because it is called as procedure because suppose I am writing a stored procedure. That means some create procedure, some SP, some get products, something like this. We are creating a stored procedure. I'm writing some stored procedure. I'm configuring some stored procedure. Am I right? I'm creating stored procedure. Now, important is, suppose the stored procedure is using a query, select star from TBL employees. So just a point I told you here. Now, if there are no records in the employees, will this stored procedure return error? Will it return error? Will it return null? Will it return null? So it is not going to return null. It is not going to return error. So nothing is returned. That means it is having the behavior of a method. Am I right? It is having the behavior of the method. If there is one record or multiple records, then it will return those records. That means now it has the behavior of function. Am I right? So procedure is something which will have the behavior of method and function, which will be according to the state of application and situation. It may return value or may not return value. That is the nature of a procedure. That's the reason in your databases, you should call them as procedures, not as functions or methods. But they have the same concept. They contain some set of queries to execute. You call the stored procedure, it will execute. Right? But why it is called as a procedure, not a function or a method? Because that is the intention of the procedure. It may not or may return the value. That is what actually the concept of difference between function, method, and procedure. But here, while learning TypeScript, what you should know is functions are defined. Functions are defined in TypeScript. Functions are defined in TypeScript by using function keyword or function constructor by using function keyword or function constructor. Functions are defined in TypeScript by using function keyword or function constructor. That means we can write like this: function f1. So that is function. Where let f2, where f2 or let f2 function 2 is equal to new function. Like this, we can create a function. So this is a function constructor. This function constructor can take the parameters and can return the value. That means a, comma, b. These are parameters, and it can return a plus b, like this. A function constructor it is used to build a functionality. So functions can be created by using these two options. I will show you. We can see that functions can be defined in this way. That means here I am defining a function. So function f1, that is the function. So console.log, this is function f1. And here I am defining let f2 is equal to, so new function. So this is a function constructor, and it is expecting a, comma, it is expecting b, and comma, it is expecting return a plus b, like this. And I am calling here f1, so which will print that message. And I am calling f2. So into that, we are passing the parameters. So that means we are passing the parameters 10, 20. And it is returning that. Then we will put console.log, and we are printing this function to 10, 20. So we are printing like this. That means here, later I will tell you about constructors, means function constructors. We will discuss about that. So just I am giving you a syntax that a function can be defined with constructor. Some more points are there here. So demo.ts, node demo.js, and you can see that it shows 30. That means this is a function constructor. Function constructor, F uppercase, and it allows you to create a function, configure a function. So we can have functions defined by using the keyword function or by using the function constructor. We call the function constructors. So, and we define some functionality into them. The functionality is defined here. Constructor accepts the string arguments and handle this. I will detailedly tell you when to use them and how do we work with them. I'm just explaining first declarations. That means functions are defined in TypeScript by using this, and this is the syntax. That means here we have function keyword used, and here function constructor is used. F and this are different. Many times in interviews, they may ask a question regularly like, so what is difference between between, so function and function. So this is the regular question, difference between function and function. So the first one is lowercase function. It is the keyword for configuring the function. And second one is a constructor for dynamically creating a function. Configuring and dynamically creating a function. The situations when to use them, we will discuss about that. How do we use and how do we work with them? But functions are defined in TypeScript by using function keyword or function constructor. Now important is class will not allow functions directly. So class will not allow functions directly to be configured. So class can call function, but cannot have. So definition for function, can call the function but cannot have definition for function. This is important. That means, so I am creating a class here, demo, and in that I am writing a function. So function and function name, some print, that is the function name. It's not allowed. You can see that it says that, so it is not allowed. Functions are not allowed here. It is expecting a method. So generally, suppose I defined this function outside the class. I defined the function outside the class. So, and it is, so console.log, suppose some print function. And in that demo, I am calling that print. So here I am calling that print method here, means print function. You cannot call directly here because methods should have a definition here. In a class, if you are creating a method, it should have a definition. That means I am writing a definition. And in the definition, it can call that print function. Remember, this print is a method and this print is a function call. I hope you are not confused with this. A method can call the function, right? A method can call the function, right? That means a method is calling the function. That means it is returning a functionality. So this can be done. That means let demo obj is equal to new demo. We created an object through obj. I'm accessing print. So we are not accessing the function. We are accessing the print method. It is a method, not the function. We are accessing the method, not the function. Here, this is the function which is called within this method. But this print is a method, not a function. So return types, so many things are there. So here, it doesn't matter. So here, what we are doing here, is there any relationship between these two? Between this class and function, is there any relationship between them? There is no relation between them, right? Then you don't need to care about that. They have the same name, I don't care because I'm calling inside it. So what is problem here? I'm calling that function. That means you created a function just to reuse the functionality. And you cannot directly call the function inside a class. That's the reason functions must be called by using a method. Understood? I hope everyone understood. Functions must be called by using a method. Functions must be called by using a method. So that is important. So that is the basic point here. That means I am running this now here. So compile and run this. That means it has to get and display that. So this is not saved. Okay. compile and run this, and you can see it is displaying that print function. And print method can have some combination of functionality. Console.log, it is having, this is a print method. Print method. So print method, inside the print method we are calling the print function. Inside the print method we are calling the print function. That's fine. We have print method and a print function. So that is the combination of methods and functions. Now the point is, so when to use functions and when to use methods? How to write the methods? What is the syntax? How do we call, access and use the methods? These are all basic things that we will see tomorrow, right? We will discuss about that tomorrow. So entire tomorrow session will be on methods only, because it's a very big concept. A lot of points are there we need to understand, right? Tomorrow we'll continue with this. Okay, right. Thank you.